your book has 4 main characters who are real people with a number of chapters dedicated to each of them. And then it has a 5th character, which is the city of Tampa. And through Tampa, we learn about some of the horrible things that happened to people as they lost their houses and their job and the crises. And Tampa represents literally and figuratively a whole bunch of people's stories and failures, policy failures wrapped up. So can you tell us a bit why? How did you get to Tampa, and why did you include it as one of the 5 big characters, so to speak?
I think you're right. It is itself a character. There's no single protagonist in the Tampa sections. There's a newspaper reporter who's kind of trying to uncover the origins of the financial crisis and finds it in mortgage fraud in all these collapsing houses that somehow got $300,000 loans from banks that were then slicing and dicing the loans into security. So he's right at ground zero of the financial crisis. There's a kind of wildly apocalyptic foreclosure defense lawyer who is representing people facing foreclosure, but who's also got a really dark view of America's future. There's an Indian-born motel owner who fights the banks to a draw when they try to take the motel away from her. And then there's a very poor family who are, in some ways, doing everything right, the Hartzels. They've stuck together. They're not doing drugs. They're not drinking. There's no violence. And yet they're sinking into homelessness. So I got to Tampa through a New Yorker assignment to write about the recession through a place. And Tampa is a great location for a journalist because everywhere you go, there's some vivid landscape and vivid people who are in, at least back in, when I was going there in 2008, 9, 10, in just the throes of this upheaval. A subdivision would be built almost overnight or half built, and then almost overnight it would empty out as all the houses plummeted in value almost by the hour, and people had to leave, and foreclosure signs went up, and you saw the St. Augustine grass growing in their front yards, and a street would kind of make it halfway down the intended block and stop because they hadn't been able to finish that street, and there might be a street sign but no houses along the street. So it had this. To me, Tampa and the subdivisions, the ghost subdivisions as they were called, was like the equivalent of the Dust Bowl pictures of the 30s. It was the physical image that stuck with me, the grass growing up in the cracks of the driveways of an economic system that had collapsed. So I just kept going back there. I think I must have gone to Tampa 10 times. And each time, I have to say, kind of nausea set in as I drove my rental car around this flat, sun-drenched landscape where every intersection looked the same because the same chain stores and 8-lane roads and gas stations were there. And it just took a long time to kind of get a handle on the formless sprawl of it. And in the end, the Tampa chapters, I think, are kind of what it all comes down to. That's where you're really seeing the social and economic crisis in its most raw form.